If you're new to Hyrox, then it's likely you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And initially, this is just part and parcel of competing. But if you don't fix these mistakes over time, it's going to get more and more frustrating and you're never going to get the time you want. And to be honest, it's not really your fault because the content you see on your social media is so vague and it doesn't really address the problems that you have. Which is why, in this video, I'm going to tell you the 10 biggest mistakes to avoid when you want to get better at Hyrox. I'm also going to tell you my little bits of information and secrets about how to address them and fix them. So let's get straight into it. Now, mistake number 1 is the biggest one that you can make, and that's just doing Hyrox style workouts. If you're watching this video, you know what Hyrox is, okay? It's running station, etc. If that is the style of workout you do and the only style of workout you do, then you're setting yourself up for failure because you need to be thinking about Hyrox as a sport. Do rugby players just play rugby? Do football players just play football? Of course they don't. They do strength conditioning. Now, with Hyrox, you need a good aerobic capacity and you need to be strong and then blend it together, which is why you need to work on your aerobic capacity in isolation and your strength in isolation. And the closer you are to an event, the more these will combine. But the further you are away from an event, the further apart these will be. So let's say you're coming from a strength background. You want to do some more focus on your running and aerobic capacity to start with. Equally, if you're like me and you come from a running background, you want to do some more strength work. And the closer you get to the event, the more you bring it together. It's just like a sport. So rule number 1 is absolutely don't just mix everything together. You need to train things in blocks like you would a sport. And there's so many different ways you can do that. So just training and Hyrox style workouts will A, make you probably burn out and hate it, and B, actually hamper your progress. Now, this leads me on quite nicely to mistake number 2, which is neglecting strength training. Because Hyrox is primarily an endurance event, people think that your general strength training isn't actually needed. But strength training isn't something that you should be doing for Hyrox, it's something you should be doing for any goal that you have. Now, let's keep on Hyrox here and really focus on how strength training can help you. First thing it can do is actually help prevent injuries. So especially from running, there's a lot of repetitive strain. So you want to make sure your muscles and joints are strong and are able to actually deal with the amount of repetitive strain you're putting upon them. Secondly, strength training can be really good for things like your sleds. Now, sled push and pull for some people like me are some of the harder parts of Hyrox because if you came from a running background, you're not going to be exposed or have the body weight to move these easily. So the stronger you can be, the easier you're going to move them. The easier you're going to move them, the less hard they're going to feel relatively to you. And the less hard they feel relatively, the easier it's going to be to get back into your running pace for the rest of the event. So there's no reason to be skipping strength training at all. And especially if you're far out from an event, you want to be doing strength training about 3 times a week. Mistake number 3 is under-fueling. Now, this is from a nutrition point of view. Now, if you're doing Hyrox, there's quite a high chance you're into your fitness, which is great. But just because you're into your fitness, it doesn't mean you haven't got a goal that you want to lose a little bit of weight or you want to gain a little bit of muscle. Now, particularly on this weight loss goal, people will be in too much of a calorie deficit, which means they're not actually getting the fuel they need to sustain their training. And this can actually lead to negative results, and it can obviously have quite a bad effect on your mental health and motivation to actually train for the event. Now, the biggest problem that will occur is the lack of carbohydrates. Put it this way, if you're doing a carbohydrate-free diet for a Hyrox, you're going to really struggle because carbohydrate is going to be your primary source of fuel for endurance events. So you need to make sure you're getting an ample amount of these. And on the week of the event, you want to make sure you're loading these as well. Now, if you avoid these, then your training is not going to be as good as it can be because you haven't got the fuel to hit your maximum performance. And if you're not hitting your maximum performance, you're not going to be able to raise that ceiling as weeks go by. So from a fueling point of view, you really need to make sure you're having enough carbohydrates. Obviously, this varies from body weight to body weight and person to person. But as long as you're having a carbohydrate source in either the evening before or the meal before your training, then this is a good way of making sure you're properly fueled. The next mistake is not doing enough running. Now, there's 2 angles that this causes a problem for. Number 1 is if you've got a running background. A lot of runners who have done running before and they go into Hyrox think they don't need to do much running because, I've already got that covered. But I'm going to let you into a little secret. You don't. And I'm going to tell you why. This is because you run, when you start your run, you're fresh. In Hyrox, there's 1 run that you start when you're fresh. It's called compromise running. That wasn't really a term until Hyrox came about, but what it means is you're running under fatigue. Now, things like the ski, sled, all the stations cause fatigue, which means a 1K run is harder than it normally would be, and it's probably going to be slower than it normally would be. So you need to get used to running in this way. So if you come from a running background, you need to make sure you're getting used to compromised running. Now, if you're on the other side of the fence, which is people who enter Hyrox because they really like the look of the stations, because let's be honest, it's the most fun bit, okay? And you're like, I don't really want to do the running, but it's in the event, so I'll just enter it and sort of get through it. If you don't run, it's going to suck, I'll be honest, because running isn't even 50% of Hyrox, it's more than that, because when you include the rock zone, which in events like London can be really long, it's definitely over 50% of the event. Now think about this logically. If I'm doing an event that's over 50% running and I don't do much running, how can I really expect to perform well? And the truth is, if you really don't like running, you need to be getting your long runs in, your intervals in. You've got to suck it up if you really want to do well. If you're going to Hyrox just to achieve it and just to do it and get through it, then maybe that's a different story. But if you actually want to do the best performance that you're capable of, you need to make sure you're running at least 2 to 3 times a week. Obviously, it depends how much you're training, but at least 2 to 3 times a week. Another mistake people make is poor race week training / nutrition. Now, race week is different to other weeks of training, not only because the race is on it, but because you need to be a little bit more careful than normal. I'll tell you what your race week shouldn't look like. It shouldn't look like the rest of your weeks of training. It shouldn't look like a normal week. It shouldn't look like my hard Monday session and then my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then race on Saturday. It shouldn't look like that. Okay, you can train on those days and race on Saturday, but it shouldn't be normal. Because what you should be doing with your training at least is reducing the volume and keeping the intensity high. The volume should be going down from anywhere to 30 to 50%, depending on what you normally do. And the intensity should still be high, okay? Now, this is just going to make sure that we're maintaining sharpness for the event and we're not losing anything on race week. Because the thing that people do, and I've never understood this, on race week, let's say you're racing on Saturday, I know people that have 1 rest day a week. And what they'll do is that they will take Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off before the Saturday and not do anything. And I'm like, during your training, when do you do that? The answer is never. So why would you do that on race week? And then you turn up feeling sluggish and you're just going to be underwhelmed with your performance, okay? Now, by all means, if you want a full rest day before Hyrox, then do it. But if you do the right workout, you can work out on the Friday, compete on the Saturday, and be completely fresh. It's just all about what you normally do and how you scale it back. Now, obviously, there's a bit more intricacy here. Nutrition is also a factor that people get wrong. Why do people try new things on race week? From my running background, this is a bit of a golden rule of running as well. But don't try anything new on race week. The only thing you want to be doing, if you're racing on Saturday, is on the Thursday night, you want to start make sure you're loading your carbs, okay? So you just want to make sure you're having a carbohydrate-rich source of food with every meal. We all know what they are, rice, pasta, etc. Okay? So you can dabble in supplementation like nitrates as well. If you want a full detailed breakdown, I will link my race week guide in the description because I don't want to regurgitate that and repeat myself now. But race week is quite easy to get right, but so many people don't. Okay? So genuinely, just don't defy common sense and you'll be completely fine. Okay, the next one is inefficient technique. If you're entering a race, the least you can do is probably make sure that you know what you're doing regarding to the stations. Now, some people just don't have access to the information on how to perform these stations efficiently, maybe because their trainer isn't as good at coaching as maybe they think they are, or you're just not exposed to that information, which is fine. But inefficient technique just makes life harder. There's nothing good that comes from not being efficient with your technique. Now, a common thing people do, people try and pull the sled hand over hand when they're not really that strong. Unless you're very, very strong, you shouldn't be trying to pull the sled on the pull over hand. I've got a couple of clients that can because they're obscenely strong. They're much stronger than me and they can get away with it. But me, for example, as someone who's above average in fitness, definitely shouldn't be doing that, okay? Especially because of my low body weight as well. So it's things like that you just need to be aware of. It's things like constantly lunging without bringing your feet together in between to give some respite and knackers you out, okay? It's things like not breathing in the right place on your wall balls, because if you breathe out as you catch the wall ball, you're just going to almost be constantly winding yourself, okay? So make sure you breathe out as you throw the wall ball. It's little techniques like this. There is enough content on the internet to find it now. If you search for it, I'm not going to keep plugging myself, but I've done demos on all of the exercise stations on my social media. But if you do your research, you can help make your life as easy as it can be. because Hyrox will never be easy. So you don't want to make your life harder by being inefficient at your technique. This next mistake really bugs me. And to be fair, it's something that we all see and want to do, but it's copying the elites. There's a reason the elites are elite. And it's maybe the reason why you're not elite. They've put in a lot of work over so many years and they've devoted a lot of time, money, and energy to it. And obviously that's to be applauded because the elites in Hyrox are extremely fit. But just because Hunter McIntyre does this workout and this style of training and these splits, etc., it doesn't mean you should, or it doesn't mean that I should, because he can handle that. He has developed a tolerance over so many years to be able to train in a very intense way day after day after day. Most normal people like ourselves haven't developed that yet. Can we get there? Of course. The sky's the limit. But trying to copy what the elites do, word for word, session by session, isn't helpful because it's training that's tailored to them, not tailored to you. Fitness should always be tailored to you, which is why you need to make sure you get yourself a trainer that does that, okay? And not just copy the elites, because copying the elites will mean you're going to get subpar results and it's just going to leave you feeling a little bit down. You can't quite emulate your favorite athlete. So don't just copy the elites word for word. The next mistake is one that I've definitely been guilty of before. It's overcomplicating the event. Now, you can really delve deep into the intricacies of Hyrox. And if you're trying to get into the World Championships, then that's something you should do. But if you're just looking to complete a Hyrox, don't overcomplicate it. It's like I say at the start of this video. Make sure you get your running in. Make sure you get your strength training in. Closer to the event, bring us together, do more Hyrox style workouts. If you're just looking to achieve the Hyrox, then that'll probably be enough for you. We don't need to be getting into nitrate supplementation or double training days or anything like that, unless you're really trying to push it for the world champs. A lot of people just overthink it and they look for edges where there aren't edges. Like, I used to work in the running shoe shops. I know a lot about footwear, especially what footwear might work for Hyrox. But I could give someone the most effective Hyrox shoe, but if they haven't been doing their running, they're still going to get a subpar result for what they want. So don't overcomplicate things. Get the basics right and go from there. Mistake number 9 is silly race day mistakes. Now, a couple of these are fair enough. It's actually quite hard to get right unless you speak to someone who's done a fair few Hyroxes. A couple of these are just, there's no excuse for. Now, the one that I think is you almost get a free pass at, or allow it once, is getting to the event too early. It's very common. I've spoken about an adrenal dump before. When you first go into the arena, your adrenaline's going to spike because you see all the athletes and you've got them loud music and there's a lot to take in from a sensory perspective. And after a while, you're going to have an adrenal dump. Now, if you get to the event too early, this dump will occur before the start of your race, which means you start your race feeling quite sluggish and fatigued. So you don't want to be getting to the arena, I'd say hour and a half tops, okay? In that range, will be fine. Always. You're always going to be able to have a walk around. You're always going to be able to find the warm-up zone. It's very rare that that's not going to be enough time. So stick to that. Mistakes that I think are probably inexcusable is trying things like energy gels when you've never used them before on race day. Like, what are you doing? So, we all hear about people who have unfortunate toilet problems when it comes to energy gels. So trying things like that on race day is just a massive no-no, okay? Other things like not eating. Like if you're competing at 11 and you eat at 6 and that's it, you need to eat closer to the event than that. Also eating things that are just going to sit in your stomach. You want things that are easily digestible. As I've said before, my go-to is bagels, that type of thing. So it's just, again, just use some common sense. Don't try anything new and just look at what other people have done has worked for them. Give it a go to yourself prior to race day and then just roll it out. And eventually you'll start having a routine that you have. I've certainly got a routine and habits now to the point on race day, I'm very chilled because I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing it, etc., etc. So just use common sense, which for the British public, we struggle with sometimes. The final mistake in this video is trying to get better at everything at once. I alluded to this at the start of the video, and I've said that you need to get better at aerobic capacity, you need to get better at strength and mix it together. Trying to do all three of these things at once is not going to work for you because the interference effect will be too strong. Now, you can get better at things simultaneously, but to get better at everything you need to get better at Hyrox, all the stations, you need long running, short running, compromise running, max strength, all of those things that you're trying to improve, you can't do it at once, which is why you need to take the block approach and prioritize. What's my biggest weakness? Okay, I'm going to focus on that. What's my next biggest weakness? There. Plan that out. See how the rest of your week looks, maybe fill in the gaps. But they are your priorities. Once they became from weaknesses to strengths, or from weaknesses to not weaknesses, then focus on something else, okay? But there's no need to try and get better at everything at once, because it'll be tiring, you might overtrain, you'll hate life, you'll hate Hyrox, and you will have wasted your £100 entry fee. So don't try and get better at everything at once. And there we have it. There was my 10 mistakes to avoid when you're training for Hyrox. Now, my last little secret is about YouTube. Now, YouTube, the algorithm will always try and direct you to videos that you found helpful. So if you're still here, I'd probably imagine that you quite liked this video. So therefore, YouTube's going to recommend you this video right here. And you should probably go and watch that because, as I say, AI is taking over the world. You should just let it do its thing, really, shouldn't you?